Parts remaining are outstanding. Parts remaining are outstanding.
You're on the air.
Okay. Well, welcome to the first planning board meeting of Town of Kennebunkport of January of 2023. It's January the 4th. for the first step is the attendance, and we have a new attendee since we have a full board. So I think I will, as a starter, I will introduce Mike West, who's our brand-new associate member. And as long as I'm introducing, we have George Lichty, the other, and then we have Larry Summers, Scott Mahoney, sorry, Tom Boak, Nina
Perlmutter.
and Ed Francis. And there we are. We're all here. And for your first meeting, as George is well used to, you don't get to vote.
Yep.
Sorry, but we are all here,
No
which
worries.
is awfully nice. Okay, first step is approval of minutes. So, everybody seen the minutes of the last meeting?
Yep, they look good. I move to accept.
I'm going to recuse myself since it wasn't here.
That's fair.
I'd like to move to accept the minutes as written.
Okay, all set.
I'll second that.
Okay, well, I'm gonna take a vote, and since Nina wasn't there, I'm going to take the vote. Ed?
Yes.
Tom, yes.
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 And George, since I think you were there, so. Okay, so those are approved. So our agenda, the first item is 21101 Ocean Sounds subdivision, Robert Metcalf, and it's Mitchell and Associates. So, here we go. This is a public hearing, so, why don't you discuss briefly what you did the last time, and then
Sure.
We can deliberate and then open up the public hearing.
Okay, sounds good. For the record, I'm Bob Metcalf with Mitchell & Associates, representing Philip and Lisa Vickers on this. As we were here before, this is really of a map correction. When this subdivision was originally approved, there was a wetland delineated on there by Woodland Alternatives at the time. And it's shown a finger of wetland that is this section in here that comes into Lot 1. And the Vickers bought the property in February of '22, and when we were involved in doing some site assessment in terms of them looking to be able to build a house, the question was raised, is that really a wetland? And when I had gone out and looked at it, I really had reservations. So we hired Longview Partners to come in and take a look at it to determine whether or not it actually met the criteria for a wetland. And you have, he's not here with me tonight, so I'm not, that's why I didn't even introduce him, you know.
Yeah, get on the payroll.
It's not a pain gig, so.
Yeah. So anyway, and it is not classified, does not meet the criteria for a wetland. So when we spoke with Werner about this, he said we'd come back for a minor amendment to the subdivision, which basically is a map change to remove that wetland from the plan. The plan that we submitted last time has not changed from what we presented before. And there's a note on there that notates where that wetland was, and with a notation that does not meet the criteria for wetland definition. So that's a brief summary of what the request is to amend the plan to remove that wetland
Okay, well,
from the lot.
so Larry, do you have any questions on this?
Well, I do have just one question. So I appreciate this very thorough application, Bob, but on the second page, it says the total acreage of the parcel, Lot 1, 60,392. I presume that's square feet?
Yes.
So it's like 1.39 acres. Just a point of clarification.
Yep.
So if somebody wants to, so,
Sure.
yeah. Okay, that's it. Everything else is clear.
Okay, anyone else? No, okay. Then I'm going to open up the public hearing. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak to this? Or is there anyone out on Zoom that wishes to speak to this?
We have 4 attendees on Zoom, nobody has their hand up.
Okay. Well, in that case, I will close the public hearing, and I'm open to a motion on this.
I move to approve the application.
I'll second
Okay, so I'm going to go down the line here. Ed,
I would approve.
Nina,
Approve.
Tom, approve. Scott?
Approve.
Approve.
Okay. So it is approved. I believe you have an FOF. Why don't we plan to read it after
Yes, I do have.
everything else?
Okay, I have an FOF, yeah.
Yeah. So that brings us to the second item, the Turbot's Creek Preserve. For change, it's Robert Metcalf of Mitchell and Associates. So. Change vendors.
Again, Mr. Chairman, Bob Metcalf with Mitchell Associates, representing Keenan Saheen on this application. Again, this is another minor amendment. When the Turbot's Creek Preserve was approved back in 2003, or the last amendment was 2003, there's an existing lot that, I'm going to back up 2 steps. This was originally a 32 some odd acre parcel that was divided, in which my client that I did the work for when the subdivision was approved, there was this out parcel that remained with the abutting land. In the middle of going through all this, he acquired this lot from the abutting, which is now Ebbs Cove, if the board has seen it. So this lot is what Mr. Saheen owns. When he purchased that, the language within the purchase and sale was granted him rights to enter his lot into the condominium association for Turbot's Creek Preserve. So essentially what we're here for is there are no site requirements in terms of improvements or anything, is to actually incorporate that lot into the Turbot's Creek Preserve. Mr. Saheen also owns in this condominium / subdivision, he owns the 2 lots, units 5 and 6, that are closer to the main road. Those have conservation easements over and cannot be developed. The amendment we made to the plan was taking off the footprints that were on the original approved plan because we needed to show they were viable lots to be converted into conservation at the time for tax purposes in the previous development. He also owns the boathouse. So he owns land within the subdivision itself already, and just is looking to incorporate this lot, and it's a simple map change again, and I know there were some questions about the subdivision aspect of this thing. Bruce Reed is here with me, who is Keenan's attorney, and he wrote a letter to try and answer some of the questions that were raised the last time, and if you have any other questions beyond what he had in his letter, Bruce can certainly respond to that. So essentially, it is another map change, but in this case, it's pulling a piece of property that has complete rights to the use of Timberledge Lane and Neehawk Lane. It had that from the beginning of time to access that house.
Okay, I guess I'm going to defer to Nina for the questions because she wasn't here last
Right.
time.
This was handed to me as case manager, and I have watched the video of the discussion.
Yep.
I have read Bruce Reed's letter. To me, it brought up an issue that I'm going to discuss first that's come up before this board, not just in this case, but in other cases, questions that were raised about the authority of the planning board. And I'm going to read the statement because I tend to go off tangent, okay? So
Okay.
first part is addressing this issue. And it's a valid question to ask why an application is before the planning board. There's no question at all about that. However, it is not reasonable to argue that an issue has no legal basis before the planning board if it is not specifically addressed in the land use ordinance or the subdivision regs. Specific enabling legislation is not necessary or possible in all cases. And that includes under the state and federal laws, regulations, and ordinances. If it were possible to anticipate and write specific regulations or ordinances for every property issue, the subdivision regs would be 800 pages long, okay? And nobody wants that. Instead, I know the lawyer who basically wrote the land use ordinance, and I believe the subdivision regs, I don't remember his name, but he came from Drummond and Woodson, wrote these documents very, very well. I'm always impressed by them. Allowing for open areas and planning board determination. That's why many of the 1010A and B findings are worded general and broad. For example, the sound requirements of the 1010A, you don't get specific decibels. It's up to the planning board to determine whether that sound, if they're making sounds, will affect the neighbors or not. Okay, we can go to decibels, but sometimes there are sounds that don't reach the level of, over what the regulations say, and still they could be annoying, and we have authority to deal with that. Okay? The more I go back and read the land use ordinance and subdivision regs, the more impressed I am with it, how well written it is. It's assumed that the planning board members will be able to cover new issues under the guidance of these documents, that they'll understand where they have authority and can infer authority to cover situations that are not anticipated by descriptions, such as this one. Okay? There's a remedy if the planning board makes a mistake in overstepping their authority or in the application of the guidelines. That's the district courts. That's where people go. Okay? An appeal to the court allows a higher authority to determine if the decision was correct. This board has been both corrected and upheld in the past. Okay? It's human. We have differences of opinions. We usually come, I think, to the correct decision. Now, I spent 2.5 years working for a federal judge in civil and criminal cases, and I can tell you, despite years of case laws, regulations, jury instructions, there was still new issues that cropped up, and the judge had to decide the case without having a specific incident codified somewhere. The determination of his jurisdiction over such matters was decided by a higher court. Okay? That's the way it goes in the way humans make decisions. You can't write or anticipate everything. You just have to use good reasoning. Applying this to the issue at hand, and let me say something because Tom brought up something here. If he just was a member of the HOA, this board would not have authority to say anything about the HOA. Okay? But here, you're changing lines. You're changing the perimeter of the subdivision. That's a different thing. My assessment is that the planning board absolutely has authority over this plan. First, because Article 9.4 says in part, if the revision involves only modifications of the approved plan, for example, a lot line change, the application will be considered as a request for minor revision, and the procedures for a final approval shall be followed. There is a question here whether this is a major or minor revision, and I'm sorry about that. I'll get to it. But it clearly lies within the scope of the planning board. If we only had authority to deal with lot lines with an already formed subdivision, the planning board should consider that the subdivision regs would restrict to interior lot lines to exclude the perimeter. It doesn't. Second, because the planning board has approved and signed the recorded plan, they need to approve a revised plan before it is recorded. In both major and minor revisions, the planning board is responsible for this authority under Article 9.5, and the scope of the review is limited to the revision under Article 9.6, meaning a revision is contemplated. Who else would sign off on it? The CEO can't, because he didn't sign off on it in the first place. Finally, I noted that the planning board and Werner seem to think this is a minor revision. I do not. Given the definition of a major revision in Article 9.1, which says in part, if the revision involves the creation of additional lots or dwelling units, the application shall be considered a request for a major revision, and the procedures for preliminary plan approval shall be followed, as well as the fee schedule. And the definition of a minor revision, Article 9.4, says in part, if the revision involves only modification of the approved plan without the creation of additional lots or dwelling units, for example, a lot line change, a driveway relocation within the lot or relocating of subsurface wastewater disposal system location within the lot, the application will be considered as a request for a minor revision, and the procedures for final approval shall be followed. There are good reasons why this is the creation of the additional lot within a subdivision is a major revision, whether inside or outside the perimeter of the original subdivision. The additional lot might require things like, an additional lot might require things like review of where the streets are, traffic, access for fire trucks, plows, open space measurements, as Larry mentioned before, effect on neighbors, and new lighting. Those are the things you go through when you look at a major revision, and I hate to put you through that for this, but it is a major revision. Minor revisions don't require these things, okay? That's how I feel about it. And if you want me to be case manager, that's how it's going to go. So I'm opening this up for other people to say things, but my feeling is that you're adding to the perimeter of the subdivision, which adds a lot line and exterior lot line as well as interior lot lines. Well, changes the interior lot line in that some of those lots which were exterior are now, which were interior are now exterior. You have to take into effect the effect on neighbors. You have to take into effect, is there a road for this lot? You have to take into effect, how does wastewater come out of this lot? Does it work within the subdivision as we approved it before? And I really don't think you have to go through every single point in here. I think we can waive having you write up another application. I think we just need to change it to a major revision.
This becomes a
and treat-
preliminary of a major.
This becomes a preliminary of a major. You will have to come back again. We can continue the public hearing, I think. But I think it could be done. There's no question about it. But I think we have to do it right. That's my 2 cents.
So I just want to make folks aware, so we're aware that this lot is already developed, correct?
Correct.
That a house exists on it
Yep.
and all of that? Okay, so it's not a vacant lot?
It's not the creation of a dwelling unit. It doesn't matter whether it's a vacant lot or an already developed lot. You're adding it to the subdivision. That's the creation of a new lot in the subdivision.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear
Yep.
that folks understood that this is already developed.
Yep.
Okay.
And as I said, there are no site improvements required. Excuse me.
There
when-
probably isn't anything required
Yeah.
for it.
Because actually, when this was developed, when it was approved, we had to take into consideration fire access, so Timber Ledge Lane, which was an easement right, was all improved to meet the town standards. And the only thing is that lot itself is on septic and well, so,
That's fine.
yeah.
As long as, that's one of the requirements is there good access for a fire truck? And if it's already there, we can just acknowledge that.
Would you like to say something, Bruce? Because I'm not an attorney, and my uncle was a federal judge, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
I'm not a federal judge, I just clerked for one.
Yeah, I know, my uncle wasn't, I'm just going to be quiet.
Hi, my name is Bruce Reed, and I do represent Keenan Sahin, who's the applicant. And I guess the last time I was here was a couple years ago for the Stage Harbor Marine, which is up the road. I think some of you are familiar faces, but some are new. This is what you get for not showing up to a meeting, I guess, Ms. Perlmutter. You get appointed the case manager. I understand some of your thoughts and concerns, but my letter, and we've been working on this with Werner for, I don't know, a couple, 3 years. This is not new. We chose this time for various reasons to come forward with the amendment. Mr. Sahin has always had the right to request this, to come forward from the original time he bought his Timber Ledge home. And again, it was developed, as Werner said. He had the right to petition to become part of the association. That's all we're trying to do here. To me, it's always looked like housekeeping. I kind of hear, reading between the lines, that you're saying we've approached this as a minor as opposed to a major subdivision amendment. Honestly, we had walked through this pretty carefully with Warner, and given the fact that it was already a developed lot, it's been 20 years now that this house has been there, right? It's shown on the original plan. Mr. Sahin is in his 80s now. He just wants to get to be officially part of the association. So I, as a title attorney, when I go to, when I'm asked to do a title search on this property, we can show that it's actually truly a member of this Turbot's Creek Condominium Preserve.
We do not deal with
No, I understand
their
that.
HOAs at all.
Yeah.
We don't really care about
But-
that. So what he's doing is well beyond that. I would say you have in your package this 1999 agreement that pretty well defines that, that he's a member of the HOA. So
And that
I
he-
don't know why he needs this.
Well, he needs it to be actually a physical part of the condominium. I mean, the condominium documents should be amended, and that's on us to do. But we have a plan of record, and it shows timber ledge, and it's not part of the condominium. We need to make that, and to amend that plan, to get the condominium documents correctly recorded, we have to come to the board because you've signed off on a plan in 2003 saying, here's the condominium. Well, we've got an extra lot here that we wanted to add in, so.
So
Wait.
can you, let me reframe the question I had at the start of this, and
Yeah.
maybe I, threw the first wrench. But it seems to me that there's two things we're talking about, and you've said, both of you said several times, that he's had the right from the beginning, the owner of the lot,
Yep.
to be a part of the HOA. And that seems fine with us. We don't have any argument with that or any thought that that should come before us. You say you have to amend the HOA documents so that, in order to say, for example, that this lot and the lots that are in the subdivision all are part of the condominium association. I don't have a problem with that either. What we're struggling with is when you're saying, and we want to change the nomenclature to say it's not this lot plus the subdivision, we want to say the subdivision, the result
Includes,
of the original subdivision.
yep.
We want to amend it to say, no, it really should have included this lot.
Or should now. That's what
No,
we're
it should
asking.
not.
Yep.
And we're not subdividing anything at this point. We're the inverse of subdividing. We're adding on a lot. And that's,
No, it is that simple. I would agree with you. It is that, we're adding a lot
so
to a
I'm asking,
subdivision.
why do you need to bother? Why can't you amend the condominium, the HOA agreement to say the members of this are is it 8 or 10 lots, however many lots are in the original subdivision, and this lot here. And those deeds are all updated if they need to be to reference the updated condominium, the HOA agreement, and then you don't have to come before this board at all. But
Well-
Mina's right in that by definition, we are adding a lot to the subdivision, if you want to consider it the noun, the subdivision.
Yep.
It's got how many lots today? How many are in the
I think
subdivision?
it's only 6.
8?
Well, there's, yeah,
7, there's 7, and now there's going to be 8. That seems pretty clearly that we're adding a lot.
no, exactly correct.
You know, so.
We are.
So that's
That's why
a
we're here.
major subdivision, and it's more money, and it's more time, and I, for the life of me, I can't see the benefit. It seems to me that the documents that we don't have control over here can be amended to say the HOA includes the lot and the subdivision as it exists. And you don't have to change the definition of the subdivision.
Well, we'd like
And
to.
in my branch.
Oh, that's okay. No, I understand. That's, I said in my letter, it's a little awkward. You don't get a request like this every day. So I understand that, but we are adding a lot to the subdivision. To Warner's point, this is a developed lot. Usually you'll add land,
So it should be easy.
but I hear Ms. Perlmutter saying that, look, you're on the right path. You really just need to treat this as a major amendment. And could I ask the board, what does that entail? What more are we looking at for, I mean,
A major amendment basically requires a preliminary plan and then a final plan. It goes through quite a few regulations that determine the parameters of the subdivision. Now, the subdivision's already formed, so a lot of those things like fire access, lighting, and so forth, and streets and driveways and curb cuts, and they're already determined. That's why I'm saying, if you're coming with a major revision, there's no reason why this board can't treat this as a preliminary plan to add that lot to the subdivision and just basically put into the record that we've looked at those parameters and approved them. But with a minor subdivision, you don't do that. You just sort of look at a lot line or a driveway that's being moved
Yeah.
within a lot.
and that's kind of, I understand where you're coming from. But we were hoping that this would be treated as, and looking at it and caucusing with Warner, that this would be essentially housekeeping, adding the lot boundary. But if you're,
It is housekeeping in
Yeah,
a way,
yeah.
because we can't.
because nothing on the ground is going to
Because
change.
it's a revision.
Yep.
And we're not going to go through it like we would, for example, with the next item on the agenda, where we have basically, we have a wetlands report, and we have a wastewater,
Right.
stormwater report, and so forth. We're not going to go through all of that because it's a revision, but we have to treat it like a major revision and say, we've looked at all of these things, we approve them. It means coming back one more time with a final plan, basically.
Essentially, as it stands.
And just go through the motions.
So essentially, there won't be any change to the plan itself. It'll just be more of the written documentation saying was submitted during the original approval.
And now we're changing it to a major
Yep.
revision, and we've looked at all the parameters and subdivision regs, blah, blah,
Yep.
blah, and say that they are workable.
Yep.
But it will involve coming back again,
Okay.
okay? But we can get through this, because you're basically changing
The configuration.
subdivision. You're adding a lot to it.
Mhm.
But let's do it right, so that you want it to look legal, and you want to make sure it's clarified in the record. Let's do it right so it is clarified and recorded properly.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
None of what you said gives me any heartburn, and I think I'd rather have it as, again, as a title attorney, I'd rather have it done with a little more than perhaps we needed, than less. So I would agree that if we can get this done in one more meeting and treat this as the preliminary, and I don't know, the other board members have been,
We can treat it as a preliminary, but I
Yeah.
think you have to come back for a final, and then there may have to be another public hearing.
Yeah, we'll have to have two
At-
public hearings,
at the
but one of
pub-
them will be just after everybody's here, and,
Yeah.
which is,
Yeah.
will presumably go very quickly.
One of them will be tonight.
One of them's tonight, this is
Yep.
on schedule.
no, I get it.
So what this is, you come back with something labeled final plan with going through all those little sub-things, say, hey, we don't have to do this.
Some waivers, obviously. Yeah, yeah.
Just say, waiver, ask for waivers, and
I'm sorry.
we're done.
There hasn't been any talk about waivers to this point. I'm confused.
Do they really need waivers?
I don't think
Because
they
it's a
really need
revision.
waivers, but we need to just acknowledge
Yeah, document, yeah.
somewhere that
Yeah,
it's already done.
Recognize that within your own regs, it says the scope of your review, right, is limited to the portions of the plan that are being proposed to change.
Yes.
And so the scope of your review is the review of the lines on the plan.
Yeah.
Because there are no other
Okay,
physical
that's easy.
changes.
So that's just looking at the external lines, and that you have access. And to me, the most important things are safety. It's, fire access, and we can just acknowledge those things and that it was meant to be part of a subdivision, and then we'd be done. So if you just change that to major revision, we'll get through it.
Because the only other question I might have is, normally do you have or need a permission from the HOA itself that says, yes, we agree? Or is that 1999 document
Well,
already say
that,
that?
that is what we're resting on in terms of our authority to move forward, but they've been informed from day one. In fact, Ken Cohen was he was the president of the condo association for years, and then sold his lot and turned it over to someone else. We've been in constant communication with them about this, so.
But I just we'd like to say that in the finding of facts, that it's,
Yeah.
you know,
That's,
the HOA finds it copacetic.
Yeah.
That's,
that's understandable.
yeah.
Are you suggesting that an updated HOA covenant would be a part of the final application?
I don't even need that. I think
No,
you just
no,
need
that-
approval from the HOA.
Yeah,
I just need something from the president.
Something in writing from the
Something in
HOA
writing
that
from
says
the
we're-
current HOA.
They've been notified of this, and I have actually correspondence I could actually produce now. Yeah,
Yeah. that's-
from Ken,
So,
yeah.
so
Just
just
put that
to
in
be
the file.
clear, not, I'm not looking for something that says they've been notified. I'm looking for something that says they agree with it.
I
They
have,
concur.
I
They
have,
concur. Okay. good.
yeah. Understood, yep.
I'm going to ask the technical question. When do you need this by to get to the next meeting?
You have to wait 30 days, I think.
Well, it's not that, the way the regs are written, it's not that, that you have to wait 30. It's when you hold your meeting within that time frame. Is the
No,
way
no,
that
I thought
is
there was, between the preliminary and the final, wasn't there a delay?
Yeah, but we're only looking at a revision,
Right.
so
Yeah.
I think we could basically
Yeah, so, I mean,
get you back sooner.
yeah, probably.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's something that we can, now, so here's where it gets a little bit, and I will just come right out and say this, a little bit ridiculous. Because what this turns into for us is the creation of another file, the filing of another full application with us, an exact duplication of all the same material that has just come before you. It requires additional notifications to go back out to all the abutters. So we
And
essentially.
an additional fee to cover that.
Right, so we repeat the entire process, all for this.
And all the information we're looking for is already present.
Correct.
Well, except for the HOA statement.
That's right.
Right.
Which under other applications, you would handle as a request
As a
for additional. Well, you.
We put it
you
on and say,
But
subject
you
to.
would have to do that for any major revision.
That's correct, yes, process-wise, you'd have a
Yes.
preliminary, correct,
yeah.
you'd do a prelim, and then you would do, and then you would do a final.
Right,
Yeah.
for any major revision.
what we're saying
But if
is
it's a
that-
revision, can we relax the rules and say that we carry over the preliminary application?
Well,
No, you need
not
to.
really.
You
No.
notify
I
it.
think
You
it's.
notice it.
You have a set, the only thing that you have, within your regs that it spells out here is it talks about, whether or not you choose to hold another public hearing. So the board, you can choose, so, we're in the midst of the public hearing for the prelim, but you have the option to waive a public hearing for the final.
Right.
So from that sense, you can make that, decision to not, hold an additional, public hearing. So, I mean, in theory, you could, have review the final. I mean, you could do it in, one more meeting in that sense. If you choose to waive the public hearing, for the final plan approval. But otherwise, we have all the other additional kind of, administrative work up front, to go through this whole process.
Yeah.
So, hence whenever, as we've been looking at this, where we really looked at it as we're modifying lot lines. as opposed to, a major issue, especially when there's no physical changes that'll be happening as part of this. But, this is your all subdivision regs. I mean, you all are the ones that have the authority to interpret it.
But it is a physical change. You are changing the perimeter of that subdivision, and you're adding and creating a lot in it.
Well, I'm sorry, just to be clear, when I say a physical change, there's no physical change on the face of the earth.
No bulldozers, no machinery.
Correct, that's right, yeah. There's no road creation, there's no,
Right.
there's no construction activity.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, you're moving a lot line around to incorporate timber ledge, which does get back to this, these are the discussions we've been having with Warner for a long time. If you're really concerned about treating this as a major subdivision, maybe Warner's suggestion of waiving the second public hearing would be an option that we could at least get.
I think it would, yeah. We could let people call
kind
it
of-
on this one.
Yeah, since we're discussing it before we actually open this
Sure.
public
Yep.
hearing.
Yep.
I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
Yeah, you already have opportunity for folks.
Yes, we
Folks have
can.
already been notified of this
So
one.
what does that save you?
Saves you another meeting.
Doesn't save you any money, right? Besides, the fee is still the same, you still have to do all the same noticing?
Correct.
All you
yes.
do is you
Yep, we do, yeah, we
create
do
the
all the
risk
same noticing.
downstream that says, somebody says, well, you didn't even hold a public meeting, I didn't get a chance to comment.
But yet you've already noticed them for this one.
For this one,
Yeah.
okay.
But you
I don't have
fall,
any problem with it, it just seems like small potatoes. so-
no, but you fall within your authority in the subregs
Fair
because
enough.
that very clearly says you can
Point taken.
you can choose to waive that hearing.
Okay.
So you're sure you want to change the subdivision? You don't want to just change the HOA regs?
No, believe me, we've been down this
All right,
path, sir.
all right.
Yeah, no, we
Good
need,
reason.
we need to do this.
Reasonable.
Yeah,
If you had
Clarify
10
it for
acres
sale of the property.
and you were changing lot lines within that 10 acres, it's a minor revision.
Yeah.
If you have 10 acres and you're adding 2 acres onto it,
Right.
we're changing the original plan, so
I get it.
it falls under that.
It's kind of semantic, but I get it.
It is kind
Yep.
of semantic,
Yep.
but it's the semantics we got.
Yep.
At the end of the day, the choice is there is whether they do it through just the HOA or do it this way.
Yeah.
Their
Right.
choice is to do it this way.
Yeah.
Their choice.
Their choice.
We
Their choice.
follow-
Hard way,
We follow
so-
our process.
Yeah,
So that's the way they feel more comfortable about it for whatever reasons.
You're right.
That's their
Right.
choice.
That's
It's
a-
not us to.
That's actually a very good way to put it. That is our choice, and
Yeah.
we appreciate your accommodating it. We're amending your previously recorded subdivision plan, so.
And we're perfectly willing to go along with it.
yeah.
Do we
Okay.
want to open the public?
We do need to
Do we have
do
other
that
questions?
Well, so the next steps are, we're calling this preliminary, and we're having a public hearing. Then the applicant's gonna file a final,
Right. Which was
and
curious to say.
we're not gonna have a public hearing, we're gonna use this public hearing for that one.
Yeah,
Okay.
We're going to have an initial meeting, we're hopefully going to find it complete,
Yeah,
and
and if we find it
so we'll find the preliminary complete, and then
and
we'll
then,
find the
and then
final
we'll have
complete.
some discussion. Oh,
Yeah.
no, we'll, when the final one comes out,
Yeah.
it'll come before us.
Yep,
We'll hopefully find it complete,
yep,
and then we'll have some discussion
Yep.
internally. We'll ask any questions we need, and hopefully we'll approve it that same evening.
yes.
And if so, then we're
Do you
good.
consider this one the preliminary?
This is preliminary.
Okay.
Yes.
You just need to request the change to the major.
So one thing I'll note, the decision to waive the public hearing for that final should be
Made
made
then.
at that meeting.
yes,
You
for
know,
sure.
I mean,
Okay.
obviously, we
Okay.
brought it up and discussed it now,
Yeah.
but, that,
And the worst case, it just means you come back to a meeting that, we're already pretty well done.
So then the time, the time period between now and the final is a month, 30 days?
well, so practically speaking, what needs to happen is that the applicant has to have time to, prepare all, recreate all the documentation that was submitted initially. Then the town has to have adequate time to be able to put together the notices and get those out, to folks. Essentially, that notification that says, this is now coming before the board as a final application. From a practical perspective, that doesn't really, you don't really have the time to be able to do that, because the same thing, we do the public, a public posting. There's not enough time to really get that in the next meeting, per se, but it would, likely be the next one after that.
I would bet it's going to be the mid-February
That-
meeting,
right.
not the first meeting in February.
Well,
But they
could
might be able to pull
Could be
it.
the first one in February.
Yeah.
I
A lot of other stuff that,
haven't done the dates, but it wouldn't be the second one.
right.
It wouldn't be
Okay.
the next meeting.
Wouldn't be
Would
next
it be
meeting.
possible to allow that we don't have to resend all of the materials to the US Post to each of the board members again, but rather something that says, maybe even an email, but something that says there's been no change? Or do you think it all needs to be recopied and resent physically again? Because that's our process.
Can the board waive that?
I don't know. You seem to be,
Can we waive it to
Can we-
electronic submission?
Well, you have, within your, within your regs, it talks about, making a submission,
Could the submission be, here's a cover page, and, here's the things that have changed, and
Yeah,
The
I
rest
think
is-
that's, I
the
think
rest
given,
is
given this circumstance, I
unchanged
think
as submitted.
as long as I have that, as long as I've got that shown, shown in the set of minutes, that that's what you all chose. I don't have an issue with that, I don't necessarily need another full duplication of the same material in the file twice.
exactly.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I don't want that to be routine, because, this could get to be something
this
out of
could
hand,
be-
but this is on a
Yeah.
one-time basis. I think it
This is-
just seems
It's a
like something we should be
revision.
able to
You have
handle.
some leeway within a revision
Okay.
to do things like that, I think. If we were going through a whole new subdivision, I wouldn't want to do that.
Mhm. No, agreed, yeah.
Okay?
Okay. So, shall we open up the public hearing?
Then I'll ask my questions after.
Okay.
Okay. So let me open up the public hearing. Anybody on discussing the Turbot Street Preserve condominium modification? Anybody online raising hands?
No raised hands online.
How many still?
We have 5 attendees.
5 attendees. Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing. And so if you want to say a couple more things before,
I didn't so much say anything. I was going to question in terms of when you need the information by, and your first meeting, you'd be looking at the earliest would be the first meeting in February.
Yeah, I think that's,
Okay, I'm not going to be able to make that one, because like the last time, when I got here late because of traffic, I'm in Waterville that night too.
Okay with us?
So I'd probably have to push it off to the next one.
okay.
You missed the drama of that night.
Oh, I saw it on the video.
What was the propane truck?
Yeah,
Pretty bad.
try to avoid propane trucks.
Oh, sorry.
That
Rolling over.
You have to keep saying, glad you were inconvenienced and not the propane truck. right?
Yes, for sure.
Okay, so.
Yeah, we'll need somebody to be here.
Can you do it in the second meeting? Because I don't know if I can send it.
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
It's up to
yeah,
you.
yeah,
I'll work through the details, but
that's fine.
I'll
yeah.
coordinate with you on that.
Okay.
Easier.
Okay.
So
We could
as far
put you on the
as
second one then.
this preliminary, we basically have to approve that we agree with it, and then you will.
I'll write a
send it-
letter.
Write a letter, yeah.
Okay, I'll write a letter.
So do we need, I think we need to take a vote just to, good luck.
Okay.
We've approved, so somebody could move.
Just to be clear, the only thing we're asking for or anticipating that'll be different on the final is something written that says it's, the HOA is in agreement with this plan.
Right, and that it's calling it a major revision.
Yeah. That the next one will say, final.
Let me address that issue. I have had discussions with the homeowners association, as I said, Attorney Ken Cohen, who used to own there, and I have documentation from a while back, but this, every single member of the association has been notified of this, okay? You've heard no objections. I will attempt to get a written letter, but this is not part of your subdivision process, for me to show that the homeowners association is agreeing with this. I know that they do, but
This would be normal for us to, for a change, to make sure that, if you were adding a lot, to make sure that the other lot owners were agreeable to it.
yeah, we have this as a matter of right, which is in the agreement that we've submitted with
If you have it as a
package.
matter of right,
Yeah,
and you've given notice to all the homeowners, and nobody's raised objections here,
exactly.
maybe we don't need an approval letter.
That's my point.
So you have something that shows that you have the right.
Oh, yeah, it's been submitted. Yeah,
We
yeah,
have that
yeah.
already.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Perlmutter, I appreciate that.
Okay, so I would like to get an approval of the preliminary plan from.
So I move to approve the preliminary plan as complete.
No,
I'll second.
Huh?
no, you're approving it.
Approving it.
Approving it, okay. Yeah, I
Talk-
move to
Mr.
approve it.
Making a
last week.
motion?
I move to approve the preliminary plan.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay, so Larry,
Approve.
Scott? Approved. Tom, approved?
Approved.
Yes. Ed?
Yeah.
Okay,
We just sit here and look at.
so are you gonna write a quick letter to them saying, we approved this, and
All right.
looking forward to receiving the final, say something that, doesn't
The
have.
final plan for the major revision.
Right, final plan for the major revision.
That will do it.
Okay, thank you very much. And last, but certainly not least, we have our friends. We have item 221-003,
Warmed up the circus for him.
KJ Trudeau Properties LLC, Glen Goose Rocks subdivision.
Yeah.
And we have. If you can identify yourself and
right.
proceed.
Good evening. My name's Lucian Langlois with Atlantic Resource Consultants, representing KJ Trudeau Properties LLC. The project before you is a 9-lot residential subdivision in the Farm and Forest Zone off Goose Rocks Road. The lot is also partially within the shoreland zone due to a wetland across the street. We did receive some comments that came in towards the beginning of December, and just through vacations and people being away on holiday. We haven't completely finished responding to those comments yet. I do have some updates based on those comments today. But a common theme with some of these comments right now is that you will see it on the next submission, and we're still working on it.
What are these comments that you're referring
So these comments are from Werner and Michelle due to our submittal for this initial review.
Okay.
So yeah, so as, you know, since we have a full new subdivision,
Right.
regular one that we have, so what we'll typically do is, we'll take a look at it, in terms of staff, and then we'll provide provide feedback to the applicant. And just recognizing that the board would also, possibly have some feedback, and that's really what, the purpose of the preliminary, this preliminary hearing or meeting is for, would be to also provide any additional, the board's feedback on the design and the layout of the subdivision, in addition to what we've provided as staff, so.
Okay. All right, well, we'll proceed with your description of the,
Great. Yeah. So the subdivision layout does include two roads. So there's two segments of road, each end in a cul-de-sac. We are requesting a waiver for the longest road segment. It exceeds the limit as defined in the ordinance. I believe that cul-de-sac is around 12,000 linear feet.
Around what?
1,200? 1,200, yep, thank you. Yep, there's a network of wetlands, 2 streams, and vernal pool habitat that has been identified. So we are submitting applications to the Army Corps of Engineers as well as DEP. Those applications are pending. We're still in negotiations with both of them. The utilities will be private septic and water wells for each lot. That's kind of that's the basic stuff here, but I do kind of want to run through some of these comments, and since you guys haven't had a chance to hear them, I can kind of say what we've had for feedback from them, and that way, you can add anything additional that you think's missing. There are a few things here that were like discrepancies between what's shown on the plan and within the application. One of them is that this tax parcel is actually 15-1-1B. We had that incorrectly identified. Another one is, and I do have some questions on this, there's reference to a Zone A flood map requiring the creation of a base flood elevation. So is my understanding that the current effective flood zone is B, but what's being referred to in these comments here is A, which is, it's the preliminary flood maps, which haven't been accepted yet. So what we've done is we were going off of the flood B zone, which is in effect. So I kind of wanted some clarification on, are we supposed to use the preliminary maps? Is that what the ordinance requires?
So I can tell you, practically, from a practical perspective, what's going to happen is that, we are now on task, and I'm going to, knock on wood here, for these preliminary maps that the town has had to be going effective sometime in July of next year. And so.
July 24?
No, excuse me, this year. Yeah, 23. I was saying that from last year's point of view. And so ultimately what will wind up happening then is that by the time it comes time for homes to be developed, you'll have a different set of dated flood maps at that point.
I see.
And ultimately what's going to wind up happening, and we've seen this with other subdivisions, is that lenders are going to be looking, they're going to be looking at the maps that are in effect.
Okay.
And also when it comes to building the homes at that point, we're going to also have to be looking at the maps that are in effect. Ultimately, for the unnumbered A zones, we'd have to be asking for base flood elevation to begin with, if any of those homes are, within or adjacent or directly adjacent to. So it's data that we're going to be asking for regardless.
Okay.
John Trudeau's other subdivision had the exact same
Yeah.
situation that came about afterwards, where there were no established base flood elevations. They had to be established after the fact in order to satisfy some lender requirements. And that flood zone was significantly further away than this one was. So it creates a practical issue. I get it. It's not spelled out well in the subdivision regs. It's not spelled out very clearly in the ordinance. But we know that that's something that the property owners are going to deal with, because it is spelled out within FEMA's regs. It's spelled out that they want to see a base flood elevation established. So that's why we pointed out, that's why we provided the guidance, the guidance language as well. Hopefully we'll be able to address some of that in future amendments to the floodplain regs, to spell out that when we have these unnumbered zones, that, there needs to be an established, a BFE established. Recognize the ordinance that we have that we're working with, I don't know if that predated the federal reg that required the base flood elevation to be required, but something you're going to have to deal with at some point anyways.
Thank you, Werner.
Yep.
So as a practical matter, then in the application, your item 11 on 2 or 3 pages in references a map set dated April 18th, 1983. Is that going to change?
That's gonna change, yep.
Yeah, it's, yeah.
You want to change that for this application?
Well,
That's what I'm hearing.
I would like to offer a suggestion.
Okay.
That may be a condition for the development within these unadopted flood zones. Maybe we could require like a LOMA through FEMA prior to construction for each proposed structure as a condition of the approval.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that, for the lots affected, you could file a LOMA for each individual, one.
Is there a preference by the board, or would you leave that up to us to deal with?
I'd go along with whatever the code enforcement office recommends.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it winds up being, let's say it winds up being a little bit tricky for these lots depending on when they're developed. I think getting it done during the subdivision process and getting those elevations established and out of the way would be preferable, because then it's on file, it's done, it's out of the way. I mean, you could have a lot that doesn't get developed for the next, 5 years or 10 years. Not that I think that would likely happen here, but it could. And, the requirement to go back and get a LOMA, those types of things just sometimes get forgotten and fallen by the wayside until the last minute. So, personally, I think it would be easier if that was dealt with as part of the subdivision review.
Okay.
Having said that, do we have any problem with saying it can be postponed till the final, rather than the preliminary? It has to be taken
Yeah,
care of
no.
by the end.
I mean, it's identified now, but it's something that could be addressed, having those elevations, because it doesn't change anything physically.
Correct.
What it just does is it provides an elevation, it provides some elevations
Okay.
for the homes, whenever they get to be built.
Just flag it now and say this is something that will, be updated
Yeah.
during the final. Nina?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because it's just the establishment of an elevation.
And
Okay.
again,
That's what it is.
what's important to me, and I think to the board, is that this is something that the code enforcement office is going to be looking at for a longer term than us. We have a cut at it, you're before us, but you're living with the result in your team, so I think it's up to your office to say, yeah, this is good for now, and,
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah, no, I don't have an issue with,
Okay.
with waiting until, the final, for the elevation establishment.
Okay. Good stuff.
Right. Okay. Moving on, we were asked to provide an estimate for the project, including the subdivision infrastructure. We are working on that. A nitrate study will be required for the subsurface waste disposal systems. That is being worked on. We hope to have that shortly. So the stormwater easement areas, we did receive a comment on that, asking if the easements are individual lots or are they part of the proposed road right-of-way. So the easements that were shown.
Good question.
And it definitely is a good question. There's a lot going on this drawing, but what you're seeing here is prepared by our surveyor. And those easements that you see, they're for gravel wetlands within the lot, so not the right-of-way area. In addition to that, so Lot 2 does require a driveway easement. We already have a stormwater easement on Lot 2, so we were thinking of writing up that easement to also include the driveway, because it's located within the same easement.
Say again, what driveway?
Yeah, let me,
You started, I heard you, maybe incorrectly, you were going to talk about the access to the open area, or no? Was I hearing something else?
No, so,
I know there's an easement, there's a right-of-way into the open area from the cul-de-sacs, but that's not what you're talking about.
no, one of the proposed driveway locations cut across, cut across another lot.
Okay.
And so just it would require an easement for that portion of the drive.
Understood.
That portion of the drive.
Understood.
Just, yeah.
Yeah.
But to just add on to that, there will be 2 access ways off of each cul-de-sac so that residents can access the open space.
When you make a driveway easement, how do you write that easement up? Who maintains it? Does the lot owner maintain it, or does the person who have access maintain it?
That's a great question. I don't have the answer to that
Typically,
right
it's whoever
now.
benefits from it, so.
Would maintain it?
That's right, would maintain the driveway. Yeah. Yeah, so if it's your driveway, I mean, you assume the responsibilities of maintenance and upkeep, plowing, those types of things. It's just recognized on the plan, and it's recognized, should be also further recognized within the deed.
HOA.
Well, for the deed on the lot
For the
that
deed,
it
yeah.
crosses. Sometimes it gets further clarified that those segments aren't part of, an HOA's maintenance requirement. So if you've got your own little private driveway that, that cuts across, that's not part of the road infrastructure, so you're responsible for that piece, and not the HOA.
That's something to think about when you're
Yeah.
putting it together. Is that all?
That's all for that piece. Now, with the HOA documents, and I think I stated this last time, but we are putting in language to deal with herbicides and pesticides, and that would just be a prohibition of the use of those.
I think there should be an absolute prohibition, because you have so much wetland around there, and you have
Yeah.
tributaries that basically support the Batson River. That's got enough problems, so you don't need to add to them.
We are planning for water supply to be, or I guess emergency water supply to be via residential sprinkler systems, something I had forgotten to mention.
May I hear that? I didn't hear that. What you said.
So emergency water supply will be via residential sprinkler systems for each home, as opposed to like a water cistern or something like that, or a fire pond. I do believe there is an old fire pond across the street, I think has a dry hydrant in it, but we're not proposing that as a means to fight fires.
To go back to your pesticides for a minute, okay. This goes against my grain, but with the emerald ash borer and things like that coming in, a lot of the invasive insects that affect trees and so forth, it's possible you might want to write into the HOA a ban on all pesticides, but being able to go before the HOA if there's a specific instance where a tree needs to be treated or something special needs to happen.
Sure.
And look at their get their assistance with someone who knows the watershed, so that, the pesticide doesn't run in, just isn't freely applied. But otherwise, you can get the human element where somebody says, I've got to save this tree, and at night goes out and pours, like a whole thing of pesticide underneath it.
I understand that.
Allow a little bit for somebody to treat something that's very important to them.
Yep. Through the HOA, through a review with them on a case by case. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So we did receive a comment about asking if there were any proposed streetlights. I didn't see that they were required, and we don't have any planned. We do sometimes suggest that there is one at each intersection in a cul-de-sac. If it is something that the board finds is necessary for this project, that's something we thought about.
I don't believe we have a requirement for that.
Right.
No, there's no requirement for it. I mean, sometimes you typically see them at the intersection of where you have a public, where a public and private way, intersect, but there's not a specific requirement for it.
But if you do put them in, you want to look at the lighting regulations and make sure that it's
Shielded
directed
lights.
downward.
I was just going to make the general comment that this is a rural location.
Exactly.
We would not propose to overlight anything, and most every one of these homes are going to be, they're going to be year-rounders, and they'll be well-lit themselves. Many of the driveways likely will have a light at the end of the driveway as well. So at the risk of overlighting or ruining the nightscape, we didn't see a need for safety purposes to add lighting to the street.
Jim, actually, if you want to stay up here for a second, the next one.
And you're not putting in sidewalks, right?
Nope, there are no sidewalks proposed.
This here?
Yeah.
The next comment that Lucian was going to refer to was some concerns that were raised about test pits, soil test pits, I think. That might have something to do with me. And that's common in subdivisions, particularly where elements of the subdivision are still somewhat subject to change. Some of the test pit locations that we originally identified for suitable septic sites have fallen inadvertently into open space area. I understood that at least perhaps one was in an open space location. In one case, I think the septic site for one of the lots ended up on the other side of a lot line or something. Lucian referred also to the hydrogeologic study that will be required to safeguard safe drinking water supplies that would be in the vicinity of these septic systems, that would be beyond the minimum requirements of the Maine State Plumbing Code for setbacks. And that study very well could require changes to those test pit locations as well. So we expect between now and the next meeting plan set to have some additional test pits excavated, and hopefully in positions that the hydrogeologist can assure us will provide for safe drinking water wells, as well as addressing the comments and concerns of the two highly skilled
So that'll be in the
technicians
final,
working for the
in
town.
your final submission then.
Correct.
So is it fair to say that the location of the test pits and of the well sites have not been finalized?
I would say on the bulk of the lots, they are fixed and final. There's going to be a couple of outliers we're going to have to do.
To both the septic and the wells?
The well locations are a bit unknown, and again, we're going to accept guidance from the hydrogeologist as to the safe placement of those.
Right.
They turn out to be well exclusion zones, that's what we call them, where we put a radius of 100 feet around a septic box.
But you don't expect those to be finalized until the final, is what I'm hearing. I'm
Well,
trying to-
generally speaking, there's more than one preliminary submission, so we may not advance to final without additional test pit information coming back to the board.
Yeah, so when it comes to well locations, well locations are not typically like pinpointed on a plan that says, yep, here's exactly where the well's gonna go. So what you typically wind up with, as Jim was mentioning, is you have exclusion areas. You have areas, based on the nitrate study, you don't put a well here, right, because of, based on the septic locations. We also have other well exclusion areas based off of the topography off of a road. So you may have areas where, depending on the topography on either side of the road, where you wouldn't want to have the well just due to potential salt intrusion, coming from any road treatments. That's also, a common element. So, and those are just things that we'll want to, see on the plan, because it's also not that it's anything that necessarily informs the board, but it informs those folks later on, who actually do the well placement, to have those areas shown where they're not, where they're not to be putting a well.
That makes perfect sense. What I'm still struggling to understand is, from the code enforcement's point of view, do you feel that it's important to have those exclusion areas pretty well set by the approval of the preliminary plan? Or would you consider saying, well, there are 80% there, and these two are likely to change on the final, or so on and so
Yeah.
forth? How do we feel about how much has to be done now in the next couple of meetings? That's where I'm pushing.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I mean, from my perspective, in terms of process,
Yes.
as long as all the things get addressed, for the final, that's really,
So if we were to
that's-
flag them and not see excessive risk with postponing it to the
Right.
final, then you'd be okay with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I don't,
But-
as long as it's
A
not
plan to
something
have
that
it.
makes.
My experience, Ed, with subdivision review in this town as well as multiple other towns, and it's a similar process, is that most of this does get ironed out. 95% of it gets ironed out in the preliminary plan phase.
Okay.
And that is to allow the board to have that public hearing that is required and have adequate information so that members of the public can weigh in. And the elements of the subdivision are predominantly fixed, so that between preliminary approval and final plan review, there's very few changes that really occur.
Well, obviously, that's better from my point of view, and I'd like to
Better
think
from our
that
point of view as well.
that it helps you bound your risk going forward.
Correct.
As well.
Correct. It's a better approach for us as well.
Thank you.
With regard to the other comments about test pits, all of my comments apply. There was just for point of clarification, for those in the septic world that aren't designers, there is a comment here that 8, 9, 15, 16, and 17 are located within driveway locations. And I will tell you, as a septic designer, I have designed a very large percentage of septic systems within driveways. It can be done. Not that we won't come back with a revision and a different location. It's not preferred, generally speaking, but it can be done so that the board understands it's possible to drive on top of a septic system if it's designed accordingly.
But not where there's an easement.
No, sometimes even where there's an easement, as long as the rights and responsibilities are clearly identified. Not in your town, with a new lot. I will suggest that was clearly a change that was made to your ordinance. Matter of fact, I believe it was due to the Ocean Sound subdivision that was previously here in front of the board, which had,
Actually, I think it was.
It was
might have-
easement.
It was because of the ledges, is what it was.
was it Ledges? I was pretty certain it was Ocean Sound because there was one lot originally in Ocean Sound that had 3 septic sites on it with easements.
The ledges had the same thing.
And Mr. Shaw was not happy with that. But anyway, an aside.
One question, Jim, I noticed on the profile description,
Yeah.
it said all the test pits were done by backhoe.
Correct.
You put a backhoe in there,
Excavator, mini excavator.
okay.
Yeah, I'll be frank with you and say, back in the day, I did a lot of work on subdivisions back in the 80s and the 90s, and we did an awful lot of work with hand tools. And the further on and the more experienced I get, particularly in ledge land like this has rolling bedrock, it's good to have a machine to get a good sounding on really.
I'm surprised you got something back in there.
There's
I
a-
haven't been all the way
there's-
back in, I've just.
There's a fair
room.
system of logging roads and
Okay.
tote roads in there, and I have some pretty
Good driving.
lively excavating operators who are up for a challenge.
God bless you.
In an effort to show that our septic systems are in safe and suitable locations, we will show those well exclusion areas on the plan, that 100-foot buffer. We will also seek a solid waste capacity letter from either Public Works or Town Manager. That was also requested. We will also implement a 50-foot no-cut buffer along Goose Rocks Road. We're not proposing to do any improvements to Goose Rocks roads. We're not proposing to alter it or anything like that. But that 50-foot no-cut buffer will be maintained.
It's not a requirement that it be part of the open space, so you can just have a restriction along the length, the frontage length. So it doesn't have to be part of open space, but can be part of open space, but.
So I'll just,
It looked like it was part of the open
space.
space.
yeah, there is a strip of open space that does come along the frontage of Goose Rocks Road there. So it will be located in open space. And there was a question if the open space was along the entire frontage. So yes, it is. There's an area of our property which goes along the right-of-way of Moose Rocks Road. So we've revised our net residential calculations to make sure that area is deducted. We still have the sufficient amount of net residential, but it's not shown on the site plan there, that overall layout. So we're going to add a table to that so it's shown right on that site plan. Also with Goose Rocks Road, there has been site distance verified, and it's not shown on this plan. That's another thing that needs to be added, show that we have proper site distance to come off Goose Rocks Road. That's kind of it to summarize some of the comments that we're working on that we received from the Code Enforcement Office as well as planning. Not a lot has really changed since you saw this plan last. This is it. So if there's any further questions, please, love to hear them.
This might be for Werner or Hugh, but on the second page here of the application itself, there's a thing that says, has land been part of a prior approved subdivision? The answer is no. Or part of other divisions within past 5 years. What does that piece mean, and do I care?
So this particular, this,
How did you answer
the
that?
parcel that you're looking at was part of a larger piece, so it has undergone
This is
one
the
split, so this,
The second split of the same
that's right, yeah,
land. Okay,
yeah, so it is, there was,
and that's within 5 years, so,
Okay.
well, why do I care?
correct. Yeah, I mean,
On
it's,
the form. But,
I
I mean, I know the first half, state requirement and everything, but why is the second?
only just because under subdivision definition, it starts counting off whether or not something is actually a subdivision.
Okay.
So it's whenever you have that third, with the creation of the third lot, that's when you hit the statutory
So
definition of a
technically that should be
subdivision.
changed.
So it's really just it's just a question that informs you, whether or not there had been a previous division from a larger piece within the
For me, it's
past
a
5
question that
years.
just confuses me, since,
Yeah.
It is a matter of technicality. It does need to be changed to a yes answer if it says no, because John Trudeau
yes.
purchased it within the
Within the
last
past
5
5
yease to
years.
bring it to you
Right.
as a
I'm sure it's a
subdivision
perfectly
proposal.
fine yes, I just didn't quite understand why.
Yeah.
No, I'm with Tom.
Paul
Tom,
Murphy, the owner of the backland, there's still remaining land that Mr. Trudeau did not purchase.
You're saying this piece was divided from a larger piece?
Correct.
Was it but it wasn't a subdivision that required board approval?
It only created 2 lots. This action now is why we're here to the board.
So this is within the same 5-year period is a new subdivision, because it's happening within 5 years.
That's correct. And the original owner has retained the back portion of this property and additional frontage on Goose Rocks Road for whatever purpose, I don't know. I believe
So
his
Tom, if we looked at
offspring lives
this,
next door.
and all he was doing was he was breaking this property into 2 pieces, it would still be before us
That's
because it
correct.
would be
Yeah.
the third lot.
Okay.
That's a good
Instead,
understanding of
it's big enough
subdivision.
on its own to have come before us.
Got it.
I think that makes me, that's what I couldn't figure out either.
No,
Yeah.
that's an important understanding of subdivision law, Ed.
Thank you. Yes, I think I'm up to third grade level now.
Unless it's been divided among families.
I understand, 7 other reasons.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so,
we could spend a
um,
whole night on the
Let's
exemptions.
not do that.
So I'll start with Ed. If you have other questions, you.
I have a few housekeeping ones, if that's okay, and
Please.
only that by the time we consider this complete, I think, let's just go through the application for a second. The phone number's missing here.
For,
20 Apple Blossom Road, Kennebunk, no phone?
for the applicant, is that the
For the
piece?
property owner,
Okay.
that, I don't know if you want, if you want to put this in front of you, or we'll just look at it later, but the phone number's missing. Down on the applicant, Atlantic Resource Consultants, the full address is absent. It's missing the town and the state and the zip code. It just says it's on US Route 1 in somewhere. It doesn't say what town it's in.
Okay. That can all be easily updated.
Yeah,
Yep.
I think so too.
Yep, thank you. Yep.
And then, that's in 2 places, you'll find that. So just to consider it. This says it's Goose Rocks Road. Is there a number of Goose Rocks Road, or is it really just?
There's not a
simply
property
number,
address
just
for this
address
number.
signed?
There's no address assigned.
00?
You're saying this is map 15, block 1, lot 1B? It should be, not 1? Is that what you told us a few minutes ago?
Ed, my guess is that's the designation for the new division that John bought.
Correct.
That would be
Yeah.
1B, whereas,
But it's on the tax assessor map right now as lot 1.
and that's
No.
because
No.
sometimes the assessor maps don't get updated quickly.
Uh-oh, that was a slur, I think.
No. They can only update those maps as quick as they can. Come on.
Yeah, so our maps,
Hit the
you know,
tax
so
assessor, huh?
we update,
Those maps are perfect.
July of next year.
yeah,
wasn't it?
no, we update them, you know, the maps, I will tell you, the lines get updated on a regular basis, you know, as we receive information, but we're typically, you know, I mean, we're typically, you know, I'm gonna be generous and say 6 months behind in terms of the information as it comes
Okay.
through. One thing that does only change once a year is gonna be the tax cards that show up on the GIS site.
Yep.
Those are only updated once a year, and that's done on purpose so that they just reflect the status of the property as of April 1st, which is what their tax status is. So sometimes, you know, folks will ask, well, you know, we bought our property, you know, or we did this, you know, within the past 6 months, why isn't it updated on the website, or we've done this, or we've done that, and it's because we're
pay more tax.
attempting to hold a record that shows its official April 1st tax status.
Okay. I wouldn't have even brought this up, except you raised the question. I just,
And that was
just wanted to make sure it
exactly what
says-
happened.
is whatever's on this application page, we're all happy with. And I was just as happy as a clam to see it, map 15, block 1, lot 1, unless it should be 1B.
Right, which it will be.
It will be now.
Okay, that's going to change to 1B. I had a question on the total acreage of the parcel is 43 and a half acres. That sounded about right. Acreage to be developed, 6.1. I didn't understand what that meant, I guess, because I know you're developing a large part of the property. It looked like 80% of it. But what do you mean by acreage to be developed then?
I do remember seeing that. Let's see.
I know in the past, my experience has been the developed area is only the infrastructure location and the individual homes and driveways.
Right.
That's it. And that's the reason why it can be a small number. Most engineers doing subdivision layout will count commonly 10,000 square feet for the house, the lawn, and the driveway.
I was looking for a way, I'm happy, I'm not criticizing, I'm just trying to understand. I'd like to be able to rate, I questioned it because the number seems small to me, and I thought I must not understand the definition of acreage to be developed. You're starting to clarify that. I'd like to be able to look at the site plan and then give me an idea of why that's only 6.1, because it looks like we're doing a whole heck of a
Maybe we
lot of
can color
infrastructure
code
all
that.
over the place.
In the
Yeah.
future?
Yeah.
Perhaps that could be color-coded in the future, Ed? for-
Well, typically, it's the area that's subject to the stormwater review. You know,
Okay.
is whenever you're thinking of that, you know, that developed area, it's typically
We're
calced
putting in
out.
8 lots, right?
No,
9.
9?
nine proposed,
And each one is around 3 acres?
correct. But nowhere near, on any of these lots, nowhere near 3 acres will ever be developed.
Right, so if it was 1 acre on each, it's not even that. You're saying it's about 2/3 of an acre of each lot is being... Oh, no, because we have the streets then.
Right,
And
right. I'm going to have
anyway,
Lucian clarify
6.1
that.
seems small to me.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
that-
again, I was
If it could
making a
ti- if you
general
could ti-
comment.
No,
Right.
I take your point. It
Right,
makes
right.
sense, and that...
We'll definitely double check that number, because
Double check that number and...
it should be infrastructure
be
and
able to
lot
relate it
development.
to-
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
So
a
we're
good
all
point, Ed.
talking about the same thing.
yeah,
And I
definitely.
like the idea that it ties to the stormwater analysis.
Well,
That makes a lot of sense.
house can only be 20% of the lot at the max.
Correct, but you may have.
Plus the streets
you
But
know,
and-
you'll have the septic system.
That's right, you've got your
You'll have the
septic, you got your
and
driveway.
You'll have the roads.
Right, exactly,
That's about it.
right.
.1 acre makes it look like it's a real number.
Right.
It is a real number. Not an imaginary number. Individual wells, individual septic, fire suppression. The other question I had was on the dimensions. Where do I look to find the size of the lots? The 9 lots, you know, I said, I'm guessing they're each about 3 acres or so, or no, I guess more than that, but is there a table somewhere that talks to that?
It's on the maps.
I couldn't find it. Why couldn't I find it?
So that's on our plan by our surveyor, JPS, and it should have a table down there. I think it's the bottom, right?
Density calculations.
But on the bottom left, isn't that?
Bottom left, we have a legend, we have a line and curve table. Your line and curve tables refer to specific chord lengths.
Lot number 9, how many acres is it?
Lot number 9
Just
says that
pick
it
it.
is 141,413 square feet. And 10,711 square feet of it is wetlands.
Oh, that's the table I'm missing, I guess. I couldn't find. I didn't find.
That-
I couldn't find it.
Which is not in your plan
I
set.
don't know, probably is, I have it on my dining room table.
Subdivision should be towards the front.
Yeah, but it's not in your plan
not,
set,
yeah.
this is JPS. Did they get a copy of it?
Well.
There should be a plat and a
There
subdivision.
is- You know, that was one of the questions that we asked, because we didn't have any net res calcs.
Okay, so maybe.
So
just
I
state
think
it
you've
officially.
probably got an updated plan there that has the table.
It wasn't submitted to the town, correct?
Yeah, on this plan right here is
where
we're gonna add that net residential calculation.
Actually, I think it might already be shown there, isn't it? Because what I see here for lot 9, 141,413 gross square feet, 130,701
Where'd you get that?
net square feet, right there.
Yes, it's showing in the lot
It's
area.
on there.
It's straight here, it's not in a table.
But we don't have a table.
On this particular plan, it's not in a form in a table, it's
Yeah.
in each individual lot.
Yeah.
So
But-
lot number 9 has an individual gross lot area and a net lot area.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the table you were just talking about,
No, that's, again.
if that gets brought out, that'll be a lot easier
Submission.
for tracking.
So that's another housekeeping.
And in that
item.
same
Yep.
vein, you mentioned, I think the road is 1,200 feet long. Where did you get that from? I don't see that on it. I don't see the width of the road, I don't see the length of the road, I don't see the diameter of the cul-de-sac, all of those things. I don't. Yeah, I see that. I don't see what where's it say how long the road is?
The length of the road you're gonna get, unfortunately, at this point, is coming off of this curve table and all these curvilinear lines added together. If you look at this plan, and you don't have this, I gather that, but this has station and shows every 100-foot spacing from the edge of the Goose Rocks Road to the center of the cul-de-sac is 1,100 and some square linear feet, so not quite 1,200 feet.
Could I suggest that if we're gonna be looking for a waiver on it, that we add it as
Correct.
as an item that,
He will note that.
Sure.
and that at some point, we're gonna say, this road needs to be, I'm guessing, 20-foot wide paved in a 50-foot right-of-way. That ought to be easy to pick off the map, and,
He's noting that. I'm seeing
Yeah.
him take copious notes.
okay.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. We can definitely add that. Otherwise, just like Jim said, you have to add some numbers, and it's not as easy to see.
Yeah, you don't
I-
want us doing that.
Yeah,
Just add a linear road length.
Yeah.
We'll have
Yeah,
that
that's-
Only because it's
That's no
gonna be a
problem.
focus, and we're gonna wanna
Absolutely.
write,
It is gonna be a focus of the waiver.
Yeah.
Because it was your guidance that sent us in
and
that
we're
direction.
inclined to go along with that, but
Correct.
make it easy on all of us.
Okay.
I think that's all I had. Just a moment.
Anybody additional?
Do you have any additional?
I just wanted to just finalize here. Oh, yeah, I did. On the open area, can you talk us through this thought that from the cul-de-sacs, there's going to be an access for all of the lots to be able to get to the open area? I was curious where they are exactly. I got confused, I think, between those easements and the other easements, maybe. And then, how do you see those being maintained?
So to start off, and these may only be shown on this plan by the surveyor, but it does indicate a 15-foot wide, what we're calling the.
Move the mic closer to yourself, please.
I like that.
So
It's not
the-
going to be paved or anything like that.
No, it will not. So the reason we're calling it a nature trail is because there's no addition of fill. It's pretty much like a deer path. It's just a beaten down path that somebody can
Absolutely.
walk on.
Yeah.
Also, the reason for doing that too is that's developed area that we need to account for to treat for stormwater too, if we were to put
Oh, right.
fill down and stuff like that. So the intent is to access this by just a low-impact trail and also to avoid wetland areas. So we would not propose to cross these wetland areas. If that is something that the board does
No?
think makes sense to come down here and go on areas like that, we can do that. There are ways to install like low-impact boardwalks and things like that, but we wanted to refrain from that and just have it so everyone can access this strip of what would be upland and maintain this wooded area.
This is not a public park. I mean, you're developing this for
Something for like to walk a
your
dog and.
owners, and one of the features is going to be access to this open area, whether it's, I think that around the perimeter isn't as important as being able to get to the substantial piece in the back.
I agree.
Mhm.
I agree. That's why we've adjusted the
That's why
plan.
people will buy these
Right.
lots.
We,
is-
we heard your comment the first time, and that's why we adjusted the plan accordingly.
Yeah,
That was, I believe it was you that brought that to our attention the first time,
possibly, yeah.
for sketch, when we were at sketch plan.
Yep.
So you see those will be easements on the deeds of the lots that those paths cross? Is that how you see that, or? I mean, they're in the middle of lots, aren't they?
Yeah, so those will be easements, and those will be easements subject to maintenance through the HOA. Not that individual property owner, because it's everybody who'll be using it.
Thank you. That's all I have. Thanks, Tom.
I think I figured out the mystery. You know, well, I think that, you know, what I think we had was that, that particular survey sheet was in the electronic submission, but I don't think it was in the paper submission. And so-
That's right. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was password protected, and we had an issue with that, and I sent it to April through, that's why, yep, through
Yeah,
email.
That's what it was. We didn't have, yeah, we didn't have,
Technological glitch.
right,
Shocking.
yeah.
Proceed, Nina.
I have a couple of questions. You're going to consult with the fire chief on the length of the road, right?
Well, the fire chief's going to have a review of the road length as part
Right.
of the review, yes.
Right, because you're asking for a waiver, and we would need to know that the fire chief signs off
Yeah.
on it.
I think the fire chief has to do with a waiver of road length?
No, but,
Well-
so process-wise, what we've done, so we sent the application to all the applicable department heads to ask for, you know, to ask for any comment that they may have. And so, and I had a conversation with Jay, and, you know, I expect something in writing to be coming from him forthcoming, is that, and preliminary indications were that he didn't have any particular issue with the length, you know, of the road, and certainly didn't have any issue with the homes being, you know, protected with 13, with a 13D system. But we'll follow up with him on getting that memo, you know, to you all.
And I'm assuming that would also cover that he can get his new truck around the
That's right.
roundabout?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So just, you know, so on that note, in terms of review, just while it's fresh in mind, so the board typically asks for peer review of the stormwater. And so, and I don't usually proceed with that until, you know, we've had this preliminary meeting discussion, and I've asked you all if that's something that you want us to proceed with. So,
Which haven't gotten to me yet, we're working. on
Okay.
it. I was gonna
All
ask
right.
that very question.
got it. All right.
Somebody else wants to ask it.
I'll
it's
leave
fine.
it to you. I'll leave it to you. Okay. No, the reason I ask about the length of the road and the fire chief is that we've had him look at that before for access. You know, how far in do you have to go to really get access to homes? So, you mentioned in your application that you were going to have waste pickup service on the roads possibly, or a private service. Does Kennebunkport normally go in on private roads and do trash
Sometimes.
and recycling?
Well, so it's not the town that does it.
It's
You
not
know,
the
it's
town.
the, you know, it's the, you know, it's our,
The town
you know, it's
pays
the
pays
vendor,
Casella.
you know. So I think, you know, in the grand scheme of it, it depends, you know. There are some, you know, there's some private roads that get, you know, that get trash pickup, you know, that occurs, you know, where they'll come in, you know, and others where they don't, you know, where property owners, you know, are obligated to bring their, you know, to bring their trash out to the street, you know, out to the public way.
So does the town decide that?
No, that's,
The
you know.
property owners can
Yeah,
ask for that?
right, so we've had, you know, there have been, you know, again, that essentially winds up being the, you know, the call up to the, you know, up to the provider, you know, so that's a Casella, you know, that's a Casella call. Now, you know, generally speaking, you know, if you can get a fire truck in there, then arguably you should be able to get a trash truck in through there, you know, but that's not something that the town, you know, specifies and dictates.
Ultimately, the town gives a list of roads that Casella does, and there's a bit of work you have to do to get the town to do it. And I know that from
Yep.
only having trash pickup on our little road for the last, like, 2 or 3 years, even though we've been down there for 13,
Yeah.
right? And we've paid, because we were paying Casella for quite a while,
Oh, separately?
separately,
Oh,
and
Yep.
a couple of predecessors.
Okay.
It's really up to the Public Works Department, are they gonna pay for it?
yeah, so, let me get back to you all on that piece of it. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that
I'm
that's,
not clear.
yeah, I don't know that that's necessary for part of the, part of this review.
No.
That's something
I
that
think it's
more,
something-
that's more something
No, it was a
for,
curiosity
Yeah, that was
question.
For the
curiosity.
homeowners,
Casella
but-
will pick it up one way or the other, whether they pay for it or not.
Yeah.
They'll have to figure it out.
right.
Okay. One question I do have is in Exhibit 14, where you have the Maine Historic Preservation and Tribal Historic Preservation Officers look at things. In the letter, basically, it says, it's regarding Trudeau subdivision, and they mention only 20 apple blossom. And it really doesn't show that
So
they looked at this particular subdivision. Is there any way to get them to rewrite that letter to show that it's applicable to this subdivision?
I can look into that. I mean, another option would be I can provide you what I submitted to the Maine Historical Planning Commission and the Tribal Historic Preservation Officers. And what that actually includes is they ask us, do you know of any buildings or structures that are over 50 years old?
Right.
So what we do is we look at the assessing data, verify if it looks the same as aerial images, and we send them an abutters map with highlighted adjacent parcels that are assumed or that we think might have a structure over that size. So
I'm sure
we did
that
send
you
them.
I'm sure that what you sent them relates to the subdivision, but the letter refers to 20 Apple Blossom Lane development,
Okay.
not to this subdivision. That's all I want to do. If you could get them to change
Yeah.
the
Change the letter to
re-
reference.
the heading there on the letter and just send the letter out again, then it'll be clear that
Yeah.
it was for this subdivision.
Sounds like an easy fix, and we can
Yeah.
try to do that.
Tree clearing. You're only going to clear trees, I assume, where you're going to develop the land,
Yeah.
basically. But I think there's a requirement in there that you need to look at trees with a large diameter, 15-inch diameter, and identify those.
Yeah, so our intent is to keep this as a rural country setting and just limit as much tree clearing as we need. And because of that, we were hoping that, I don't know, we had kind of floated this idea. You've had more experience with this.
I don't know, we might ask a waiver for the location of large diameter trees in areas that are designated as open space or not anticipated to be cut. House locations, as we show them on the plan, we might request that the board accept information consistent with the ordinance for just those locations and perhaps the location of the road and any of the stormwater structures that may require tree clearing.
Right. That's what I
And
was-
kind of narrow that scope, because to locate every tree over 15 inches, as you well know, on a piece like this, particularly beyond the house sites, could be quite an arduous task.
Right.
So if the board is
Kind of
willing.
ties into that land to be developed
Correct,
question that we
very
had
much so,
earlier.
very much so. And in
Well,
the,
with some
That's what
vagueness
I
on
was-
that,
in
it sort
in
of
the
makes it hard
in the
here.
past, the board, both this board and other boards that I've come before in this town have been willing to consider, I don't want to say a waiver, but maybe a partial waiver for certain locations within the subdivision.
Well, that's what I was assuming, that you would only ask for a waiver if you had to cut a tree, but you would identify the
Correct.
trees you have to cut in the area you have to develop. I'm not talking about undeveloped land.
Correct. So I would
I'm assuming that's
suggest,
going to be left alone.
I would suggest that the surveyor would return to the site, identify those building windows as they're shown on the plan, and then individually locate any of the trees beyond the diameter requirement.
That could be in the final. The only other thing I have is I'm a little concerned about the way the open space runs. You haven't got a large plot there, and you're talking about access through footpaths that aren't developed. Are you going to have a problem with people worrying about people going through their lots? It's something you might take a look at.
Okay.
I don't think it's a problem we perceive if the easement locations are clear, identified in the field accurately, and clearly referenced in the deeds. At that point, you know, should someone feel wronged, it would be an individual issue. We would, in order to make this so that these lots are safely saleable in the future, again, I'm going to remind the board that Mr. Trudeau lives directly across the street from this subdivision. We're going to want to make sure that it's clear and that there won't be too much room for people to be confused about what they bought for a lot with whatever rights and responsibilities go with that.
Good, okay. That's all I had.
Okay. Well, Werner, we want some review of this, peer review.
Stormwater.
Sounds good. We'll get it,
Okay.
get it shipped off.
And, you know, I'm pretty, well, okay. Why don't you proceed, Scott? Whatever you got.
Yeah, if you could just go over the waiver request on the trees again. So for the,
So the
I
idea.
mean, you stated it like.
So the idea, the ordinance blanket requests that the applicant provide locations within the subdivision for any tree greater than, I believe, Nina said.
15
Is it
inches in
15 inches?
diameter. It probably
So,
shows
so,
that.
so it doesn't take much in a very wooded lot to have a 15-inch diameter or larger tree. Because much of this subdivision is proposed to be remaining as open space. You have an open space requirement in your ordinance for subdivision. This is true of every subdivision I've brought before you. In my past, I have requested of the board a waiver of location of trees in excess of the required diameter in any non-developed location. In other words, we're only going to then provide a subset of that documentation as the ordinance requests or requires it, but only within developed areas, not over the entire parcel. We would ask the board to be reasonable and suggest we don't need to locate 15-inch or greater diameter trees in areas that we're proposing to leave as open space, never to be developed with a house or a home. And so we feel that portion of the waiver, if you will, is justifiable, and hopefully the board would find it acceptable. As I said, you have in the past, so this would be a refresher for you if, because I know that you've been sitting at that table for other subdivisions that I brought. I don't know whether you were on the board when I had John Fitzpatrick's over on, what's that?
I was the case manager for your last one.
Yeah, I don't know, was it a subdivision or not?
Well,
That was not a subdivision, though.
Right.
So we didn't have the open space question, and we didn't have the requirement to locate the larger than 15-inch diameter trees. But I know in the case of the Oak Ridge subdivision we did a while back now, that could be 8 or 10 years ago now, for John Fitzpatrick. That was a 7-lot subdivision, also in this zone with the 3-acre minimums. And I had requested a waiver at that time for the location of the large trees other than in areas that were where the houses were going to go, and the board accepted that at that time.
I remember
Thank you,
Oak
Jim.
Ridge, because at a later time when I was on the board, you had to move one of the building windows on it.
That's correct. That's correct, due to vernal pool habitats. So,
Anyway, so,
is that satisfactory an
Yeah,
answer?
thanks, Jim.
Okay, no problem.
Larry.
Okay, so I just had a couple of things. So back on the trees, so you're going to produce a plot with the trees located on it? You're going to just update this with,
Yes,
Tree
but it will
locations?
only be tree locations within the area of the proposed road or the homes
so we're going to see the trees on a,
on a future plan.
It'll
Okay,
be the-
good deal.
the place where they expect to clear trees.
okay, that's fine. So my next question is, so I noticed that the open space is mostly around the perimeter of the subdivision. So is there a need to delineate the boundary, like with a fence or something? Because I could see somebody, is there a concern about trespass? Somebody's going to walk out there and he's just going to keep on going, right? So do you need to limit that somehow?
It has not been an issue in the past on subdivisions I've worked on. Most people who have house lots that abut open space wanted to create their own line of delineation. Many of those individuals would install fences very clearly, just a foot or so inside their lot line to make sure that there was no chance anybody could wander onto their property. Other occasions, some of the homeowner associations I've worked with have been much more proactive and have wanted to procure signage from a company such as mine, and we would literally mark the trails to have people avoid walking off into the open woods and consequently possibly trespass onto a property they're not supposed to be on.
So this is more like an HOA issue?
Much more is an HOA issue, yes.
Okay, thank you. And then, back on the FEMA flood maps, so those are gonna be, so Werner, those are gonna be available this spring, right? Is that right, the
God, I
updated?
hope so.
So,
I was talking to Sue Baker today,
Yeah.
and she did say July 2023 is the, yeah, 2023.
So
Sue
summer,
says it,
goal
then
date.
it must be true.
Who is Sue?
Sue Baker is the main flood insurance program leader, Department of Conservation, I believe.
Yeah,
Augusta.
that's right, yeah, yeah.
So-
So each state has its own individual floodplain management program, and Sue's
Didn't
the
recognize
head of
the
that.
name, that's all. You would.
so then, depending on the pace of approvals, the final application could be submitted before the final FEMA flood maps are available? Is that what's gonna happen here?
Yeah.
We have drafts.
Correct, yeah. So, I mean, I can tell you that, you know, the areas that have been, you know, that have been the subject of, you know, debate and concern are not these inland areas. You know, they've been the coastal areas. The town, you know, back in the early versions of, the floodplain maps, we actually had gone through a process where we, had hired Ransom Environmental to produce these unnumbered A zones, because what we had found was that what FEMA had produced in this digital format was very inaccurate in terms of how it was shown and how it related to the topography on the ground, as well as features on the ground. They just didn't spend any time looking at the inland flood zones. And so many communities, hired outside firms to do that type of study and then submit that data to FEMA, and they subsequently incorporated that into the maps. So that's information that we've had for, a fair amount of time for the inland, areas that FEMA accepted, a number of years ago as part of the mapping. But they just weren't they're not regulatory, until you go through this whole piece. But
It's possible, but you don't expect those data to change between now
No.
and July. So
you're right.
So it's
Yeah,
available now, but
that's the
it's
bottom
not
line, is I don't
official.
expect to see,
Okay, so the existing FEMA flood maps should still apply to this location?
they're the.
And the new ones are
Draft
not going to
ones.
affect
The
it?
draft ones.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
draft ones, okay. Okay, so
I
that's
mean,
that's great.
ultimately, that's what the homeowners are gonna be dealing with.
Yeah.
And by the time it comes, time for construction, that's what we'll be dealing with,
Okay.
on the ground, is gonna be those, the maps that you see. So if you were to look at the town's GIS
Mhm.
and turn on the flood layer there, that's the updated, those are the prelims.
Okay.
So how would those, if you were writing into this document today that you were going to follow that guidance, those preliminary plans, how would you refer to them? They obviously wouldn't be the 1983 FEMA maps.
Sure.
They'd be
yeah.
what? Is there a
Right, I mean, I'd be,
commonly accepted way to refer to them?
Yeah, I mean, there's, right now, what we have identified on the website, are the 2017 preliminary.
Preliminary
Yeah,
maps.
preliminary maps.
So I'd be okay with that.
Yeah,
And,
okay.
Those are, it's FEMA, issues guidance documents that tell you that, for construction purposes, that you're really supposed to be looking at and referring to best available data. And so they define best available data as if a community's going through a process, they're going to identify the preliminaries, as best available. They're going to look at the current regulatory as not necessarily the best available data. So,
With a 20-year update cycle.
that's right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Okay.
No
anything-
questions.
Mike,
Yeah, I got a couple.
go up to the mic, get a little closer to the mic.
On Exhibit 1, there's discussion around the construction schedule. And I guess, Warner, does that become a permit condition? Where when they can remove trees and work around the stream crossings?
So those types of conditions are, would likely come through any of the DEP permits. So we don't have, so locally, we don't, for this particular site, we don't have any timing issues surrounding, site construction or tree removal.
And we don't have those permits yet. It was just kind of put in there under construction schedule for bats and then impact to the waterway, and
Yep.
I was wondering how that would be enforced.
Yeah, that's subject to the, to whatever the DEP permits are. They'll specify the timeframes, and then then the developer will need to comply with, with those timeframes.
Okay, good enough. Then I noticed on Exhibit 9, it talks about 25-foot setbacks, but then later on Exhibit, I think it was 13, the recommendation from Fishery and Wildlife was 100-foot.
Yeah, that's an important point to distinguish. IF&W makes a recommendation. Their recommendation is not statutory. The DEP standards are the statutory requirements that we are
And
mandated to
25 foot
follow.
is DEP, or we don't have that yet.
We don't have the DEP permit yet. The 100-foot recommendation you're looking at, I believe, is a typical stock IF&W recommendation for every stream. And they don't even really distinguish one type of stream from another, quite frankly.
Okay. But that will be clear in the DEP foot.
That will be-
What it is, and right now you're working that will be 25-foot.
Yeah, that's, I would say that's a major component of our negotiations with them, is making sure we've avoided and minimized, and leaving a buffer between resources is a major thing with this parcel, given that it does have vernal pool habitat, although not significant. It is productive for salamanders and wood frogs. That letter also indicates that there's spotted turtles, which are located very close to the
And that was Exhibit 13, the Maine Fish and Wildlife?
Yeah,
And
so-
that seemed to be a desktop study?
That is, it's a screening tool by them, so it helps us know what they have mapped in that area. And then once we submit an application to DEP and the Army Corps, then we have a more thorough review, usually by a biologist who has a more intimate knowledge of that area.
Right, and that hasn't occurred yet?
Yeah, that's in progress
It's in
right
progress.
now.
I just
Yep.
didn't see, because I saw
It's not complete yet.
the vernal pool assessments that were done, and I guess in the electronic copy, I had vernal pool once, twice. And so there was only one, I only had vernal pool number 1, and then it was repeated again in the electronic copy, vernal pool 1 again.
Was that like
That was
a data form that had a bunch
It was
of?
a data form,
yeah.
number of frogs and
Okay.
that, and it was also from 2018.
That was the year that the study took place.
And I mean, Warner, is there a shelf life on these, or has there been changes in requirements and regulations since 2018 to present?
Not locally, so, not for us locally. I mean, that's up to, I'm sure DEP has a shelf life. I don't know what it is. Jim, you
There-
may be able to speak to that, but,
There's no hard and fast shelf life for a vernal pool study. So far as I know, the DEP has made a policy of requesting updated wetland boundary mapping if more than 5 or 6 or 7 years elapses from the previous delineation of boundaries. But in terms of vernal pool documentation, I've submitted documentation 3 or 4 years after I've done the study, and it's still been acceptable to IF&W and the DEP.
And whatever covers that, the rules haven't changed?
Nope.
Okay. All right, we got the Apple Blossom Lane. I guess I noticed under the stormwater maintenance plan, there were very serious post-construction requirements of how that's gonna be maintained and all that. Is that covered in the, I guess, deeds of the houses when they get there? Or, because they're talking about all sorts of different inspections and maintenance from quarterly right on through.
Yeah, we make recommendations for the contractor to inspect erosion controls regularly,
Well,
and
that's when you're building. This was post-construction. This was
that is,
after.
that's for stormwater best management practices, so that's like that's your gravel wetlands that we're proposing.
Right, so who's responsible for maintaining all that going forward?
That will be the developer until the HOA is formed and they take over maintenance.
And then that is enforceable by no one if it's the HOA.
Yeah,
So
it
we
becomes
have
the
a-
responsibility of the HOA. Yep, to
Right, so
maintain,
who-
to
I mean,
maintain
To
their
maintain
stormwater.
stormwater, it's fairly significant amount of work here.
Mhm.
But that is HOA and that's enforced by whom? Only the HOA?
By the HOA.
Our DEP permit will require a 5-year recertification. Every 5 years, we're required to submit to the DEP to give like an overall report of all the maintenance that we've done and that it was installed correctly. Usually, there's a condition that we have to actually give them photos or a report right after the installation of a gravel wetland so that they know it was installed correctly.
The HOA will take that duty going forward to the DEP? Correct.
They will.
And so that'll be the relationship. Interesting. Okay.
So
It's a
the
tough thing to
HOA
enforce.
The HOA covenant will need to call out that responsibility,
Certainly.
right? And
The HOA docs typically call out the responsibility for maintenance of those stormwater structures, just as
Yes.
ditch lines along the road, culverts underneath the road, and so forth become part of the infrastructure of the
just
subdivision.
like it says, HOA is responsible for plowing the roads.
Correct.
It's going to have responsibility for this,
So all is
and
covered by the.
so we'll have a draft copy of that as part of the final.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so that's where we see it, to make sure it's covered. Okay, good.
Right, and then that'll be called out in the deeds of the various lots, that they are responsible, they need to be a member of the HOA, and,
Yeah,
know, how that-
It
how
was
that all
just
works.
more extensive than I'd seen before, and I guess it because of the stream crossings and that.
I hadn't caught it either, but it is, we got to walk the site a while back, and it's wet,
Yeah.
so.
And
Oh, I missed that.
our company is unique in that we do have a lot of construction inspectors. I'm a third-party inspector myself, so we definitely take the construction part seriously, and we load it with a lot of
I
that.
understand, yeah, that's gonna be handled. It was just the going forward in 5 years and 10 years.
Yeah,
Ensure
you
it's
picture yourself as a
successful.
lot owner, and how is this,
I've got a question regarding that. What happens, you develop the land, you put the homeowners association, you got the 9 lots, one person buys a lot, they are now the homeowners association, and the other lots don't sell for 5 years. It all falls on their responsibility?
No, it's the developer.
No, it will
Still
be
the
the
developer,
developer, yeah, in that
Because you
case.
still own the rest of the
that
property.
transition
Yes.
Thank
point
you.
needs to be specified.
There's
You know,
a transition point.
Thanks.
And-
X many lots have to be built.
Got it.
At that transition point, we're also required to submit something to DEP to let them know we're moving responsibility over to the HOA now.
Thank you. Haven't seen that before.
That it?
Thank you.
I have one follow-up. I should have asked earlier, could you help me understand on the plan, the 101 document? I know that there's a piece of shoreland zone here somewhere. It's because of a stream that's across the street, correct?
That was one of our comments from Warner and Michelle.
Show on this plan where that ends up?
The shoreland, so this is the flood
shoreland
zone.
buffer?
The shoreland buffer, and unfortunately, it is not on this plan, but
It's on one of the electronic ones.
Oh,
Yeah.
So we're going to see
you
that.
want to flip this, actually.
It's on one of the electronic ones. It wasn't.
Our surveyor did a great job.
Does it look like,
It's on this one. See this radius curve right here?
you're saying, and it's not where
And it's-
Lot
it's-
2 is being developed?
Correct. It's
Yep.
only the front where the no clear buffer is.
Okay. Again, I haven't seen
But
that
it's
that chart.
determined from what is the head of a stream coming out of the
No,
fire pond.
I
across
read
the
that,
street.
but I didn't look at this, I didn't get a look at this chart
No.
until
It'll be
now, and
helpful.
if it could be marked on this one.
This will all be cleaned up so that that plan has that too.
Word was showing me on there, but if it could be on the plan as well, that would just be a confidence boost. Okay. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, so, I guess the question is where are we going from here and when do we next see these guys? And I don't think,
It's not complete, is it?
it's not, I don't think it's complete at this point. I'm not gonna say it's complete.
Don't we need a public hearing anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Well,
so,
once we declare it's complete, we need a public hearing.
not necessarily. You can declare an application complete and still continue the preliminary review, before holding your public hearing. So you don't have to, you don't have to, have that public, you don't have to set the public hearing. I mean, you set the public hearing whenever you want. But if you're not gonna declare an application complete, you have to say why. And you have to give them a list of things that you need in order to declare it complete. And so
Right.
typically, an incomplete application is missing pieces of,
Right.
of the application.
Right.
Uh,
There are some
Yeah.
things which he's agreed to make
I think
changes to.
Right. I think there's
Well, we're still
additional
preliminary.
information that's needed as part of the review.
Yes,
But it's up to the board to decide whether or not you think that's whether or not that should be considered incomplete, as opposed to additional information needed, just needed for further review.
Right, we might want to distinguish, if you will, the application material submitted to fill the boxes in the application versus the discussions we've had tonight and your request for additional clarifying information, and that being something different than an incomplete application.
true. So, okay, I guess, what we want to have the peer review done. And so do we, I'm presuming that we decide it's complete, which I think is a good chance. The next time we're gonna see them is after that, would be more like a month from now, anyway.
Well, I think, I think the applicants can, give us an idea in terms of what their time frame is for some of the additional information. And then, I can tell you that you won't have a peer review in time for the next meeting,
I knew
so,
that.
so I would expect that we would probably have at least, we wouldn't be looking at the next meeting in January, but likely maybe a first meeting in February.
And that being potentially a sufficient amount of time for us to bolster the information
Yeah,
up
that's
that we
what I
need
was
to
thinking, is we
resubmit
get
back to
all
the
of
town.
that at the same time, and then but make that a.
Continued, that's a.
So we'll declare it complete, but we'll continue the preliminary hearing
Correct.
until a later meeting
For further information.
we're gonna get further information before we,
So you're not going to schedule a public hearing for the next meeting? That's what I'm understanding, you say.
well,
Well, you could.
If you
Why
find
don't we
it
do it?
complete and are just waiting for additional information, then you can schedule a public hearing. But you may not want to find it complete until, that's an awful lot of information that we've asked you to provide. You may want to not find it complete and just continue the preliminary
I mean,
assessment.
it's semantics,
Yes.
to some, to
Right.
some degree, but,
Alternatively, you could open a public hearing at the next meeting and hold it open
But we don't
for
have to
additional
hold it,
information
Right.
at a following meeting.
So my gut on this is that I had a hard time reviewing this. Okay. I went through, I had this out on my dining room table, I poured over it, and I struggled. And what I'm hearing tonight is, oh, Ed, you should have looked at the electronic copy, and, yeah, that the length of the road is 1,200 feet if you'd added up all of those. I'm not saying the information isn't available, but it wasn't in something that the public could
Understood.
review and come easily to the next meeting and have a good comment on it.
Well, I think that's why we're not necessarily suggesting,
Just the semantics, I don't want to be disparaging and say it's incomplete. I just want to say it was difficult to review because there's some logistics issues. And-
Again,
And I think we've highlighted those tonight, and we've got assurances that we're all comfortable that information's available, it just needs to be pulled together
Right.
in a reviewable form. And I want, if there is public interest in this, I want them to have the time to look at it as well.
presumably that would be the time between now and that next scheduled
yeah.
meeting and public hearing.
So given that, what's the best way to get there? That's all I'm saying.
Well, I mean, my view is that the preliminary, this is preliminary application is substantially complete, and, you know, a public hearing could, start in the next meeting.
Right, we're not
That's what I
approving
think.
the
No.
preliminary.
Right.
So
Well,
I think.
The application, the preliminary application,
You can find it complete.
I think we can find the
uh,
preliminary application complete.
I think so, that's what I think.
That it clearly needs work, and we've discussed all of that, and you're gonna have that for the next meeting, or the first meeting in
Couple of
February.
meetings, yeah.
And then I won't be here, so Nina gets charged of
right in my
that.
lap.
That's great. I love
Just
it.
what you were hoping for, huh, Tom? Got it.
He's planning this out on his
Do I sense someone kicking the can down the road?
But anyway, so, I guess I'll take a motion that it's complete.
So I move that the preliminary application is complete.
Okay,
I'll second that.
all right. I have a feeling that you're.
Why don't you start at that end?
All right.
I'll
start
go
at that.
along on this,
Okay.
but I'm
Approve.
uncomfortable. That's all.
Yes,
Approve.
Approve.
Yes,
We start the other,
Well, that's something.
I'm skeptical.
yeah, we know.
this way. So,
So, just for our purposes, the staff, do we, are we looking to set the public hearing for the first meeting in February?
Yes.
yeah.
Is that a manageable thing for you?
Right, so
Okay,
that'll be the
good.
next time that we'll see them and we'll have
Yeah,
them on
doing
the
a lot
agenda.
Big stuff on
Two or
there,
three
but we need to
other-
get Mark Sensen on board. And
Okay,
Well, that doesn't
Subdivision
prohibit
plans
us
already
coming
planned
back.
for them.
no,
Right?
Yeah,
That could be dangling still, but you're right.
Would it,
that's the other
Warner,
thing I don't want to
possible to
build
get a
up.
hard copy for me on this one? Because all I got is
Yeah.
electronic.
yeah,
So
yeah,
if I get a
Y'all
hard
can ship
copy,
us
that
a-
would be
a hard copy.
great. It saves me
Yeah.
trying to find this on my computer versus my dining room table.
Yep.
Okay,
And if you
I
want
don't
to get
have
them to
that
me,
big a
I can
screen.
get them mailed or whatever. I can do
Yeah.
this.
so we will,
I need a pretty good sized dining room table, actually, for
I
this
got
one.
that covered.
so you're gonna give this over to
Yes,
Acorn or
yep.
whoever? and,
Yeah, I'll send it over to Acorn, and then the next meeting, which will be the public hearing for the prelim, will be the first meeting in February.
Right.
You have a date for that offhand?
You need a case manager.
Yes, I'll get there in a
I
second.
believe that's the first of February.
February the 1st.
Yep.
It is February 1st.
February
Okay.
1st.
Wow.
Well, that's easy to remember.
Yes.
Right?
Okay.
So,
Okay, and we need a case manager. I see heads shaking this way. More than me.
There's not a lot of volunteers. in
that's
there.
right, Ed, you've got some great questions.
No, I didn't think it was complete. I'm not ready to take, it's complete.
everyone starts
okay.
looking at the
Shall I
ground.
volunteer?
You can.
Okay, I'm gonna need a lot of help on this.
Well, you live next door to him.
I live next
I'll
door.
help
Okay. So am I gonna read the
I'll
FOF?
take it seriously, but
Am I gonna read the finding of
Oh,
facts?
yeah, you have a findings of
I'm
facts.
still
You
waiting.
can read it.
Sorry?
I know you went over some of the issues up front that were important and comments that you received, but I'd like to make sure I have that information, or Larry and I have that information. And this is, again, I think it's critical that the code enforcement office is completely comfortable with the board's process on this.
Sure, yep.
So, but for me, the next step is to write a letter, right?
No,
No?
not for a while.
Okay, all right.
No, it's
The
to,
the letter is.
it's
when
to
we
review the
approve.
materials
Okay, when you approve.
that weren't there yet.
Okay, well, we'll get to in the final approval, okay. When the, all right, we'll fill in the blanks, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we have one more bit. We're done with you guys.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
guys.
We
Have a good
our finding
evening.
of facts for
Appreciate
the,
your patience.
Thank you.
the first
Okay.
item. So why don't you proceed?
Okay. So this is Kennebunkport Planning Board, finding of fact and decision, application for minor subdivision amendment, Ocean Sound subdivision, 7 Ocean Sound Drive, Kennebunkport, Maine, 04046. To reclassify land area previously labeled wetland as upland on Lot 1 in previously approved Ocean Sound subdivision. Following a review pursuant to the Kennebunkport subdivision regulations and land use ordinance held on December 7th, 2022, and a public hearing held on January 4th, 2023, the Kennebunkport Planning Board makes the following finding of fact and conclusion and renders the following decision subject to the conditions enumerated below. Findings of fact are as follows. The owners are Philip and Lisa Vickers, 1 Huntington Avenue, number 702, Boston, Massachusetts, 02116. Applicant is Mitchell and Associates, represented by Robert Metcalf, 70 Center Street, Portland, Maine, 40101. In a letter of authorization dated September 26, 2022, owner authorized applicant to act as agent on behalf of owners in this matter. 4, property is identified as map 20 block 4, lot 1C on the municipal tax assessor's maps. 5, property is located in the previously approved Ocean Sound subdivision in the Cape Arundel zone. 6, applicant has demonstrated a legal interest in the property by providing a copy of a warranty deed recorded in the York County Registry of Deeds, Book 18956, pages 84 to 85. 7, applicant retains services of Longview Partners LLC to perform an evaluation of wetland characteristics of the property. Based on results of the evaluation conducted in July 2022 and documented in Wetland Delineation Plan dated July 25, 2022, only the area located in the southeast area of the property remains wetland. The narrow forested fingered swale, formerly classified as wetland, located in the west area of the property between 2 bedrock ridges should be reclassified as upland. 8, reclassification is based on vegetation observed on the swale, including presence of insufficient water saturation for dominance of wetland vegetation and therefore justifying reclassification. Permitted construction in the year 2014 of the subdivision road filled a portion of the swale. Construction of stormwater drainage provisions also may contribute to changes in wetland boundaries in this swale. Removal of large canopy trees adjacent to the swale changed the amount of incident sunshine reaching the forest floor. Impact of these physical changes is reflected in dominant growth of upland vegetation such as red oaks instead of wetland vegetation. Improvements in mapping technologies also support reclassification. 9, applicant submitted a final amended subdivision plan dated June 14, 2013, and a minor subdivision amendment plan dated October 31, 2022. 10, there are no historic sites affected by this undertaking. Conclusion, in accordance with Articles 7, 8, and 9 of the Town of Kennebunkport Subdivision Regulations entitled 30-A MRSA Paragraph 4404, the Planning Board grants approval of applicant's proposed minor amended Ocean Sound subdivision plan application. Decision, the revised final subdivision application identified above is hereby approved. Conditions, this approval must be recorded with the Registry of Deeds within 90 days of approval, or it becomes null and void unless an extension is granted by the board in writing. 2, prior to any permits being issued or any lot being sold, the applicant will post a performance guarantee that complies with Article 13 of the Kennebunkport Subdivision Regulations and is satisfactory to the town manager. The amount of the guarantee will be based on actual bids for construction. 3, the applicant will comply with all terms and conditions of the Town of Kennebunkport ordinances and subdivision regulations and of all applicable federal and state regulations and approvals, as well as those specified in the final application, all of which are incorporated herein by reference. And this dated January 4th, 2023. So I move to accept the finding of fact.
Seconded? Okay.
I would second. Yeah. Oh, we already second?
I seconded, but that's.
Yes, I agree.
Agree.
Agree?
Agree. Agree.
Okay.
So let me sign this and
Yeah,
send
is
it
there
around.
space for Mike?
Sorry?
Is there a signed space for?
Well, I didn't, no, I did not include Mike's
Well,
name.
you can have him just,
Okay.
have him sign it anyway.
Yes,
Write-in
please.
ballot.
Yeah, right in.
Right in ballot.
Next time, Mike.
Okay,
Very good.
no worries. I will still sleep well tonight.
Okay, so I guess I can take while we're signing, we take another motion here.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Yes.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Did you sign that one? Did. Okay, coming your way.
How come my mic's still on?